Ni hao, Annyeong. Hello, I am the Dark Fae, and welcome back to Confessions of a First-Time Dungeon Master. As always, if you missed the last session, I'll put a link to it up in the corner for you over here. You can go check it out, catch up on what you missed, and then come back here to find out what happens next. We are now in session 60, so let's begin. Okay, so after the group takes a long rest with their escapades in the tavern, unfortunately Valkyrie was still unable to join for this episode, so kind of dropped some a lot of story elements to it, so hopefully I'll be able to catch her up kind of before next time. But basically the party decided to kind of go monster hunt in Remir one more time before meeting with Asmodeum about a variety of topics, really. So they head down to Remir and they noticed that the kind of security in the city has upped quite a lot, and that the guards are kind of all at the ready and kind of tense, and so they meet up with Samari and Fetzer again, the Nightingales in charge, and the two Grim Knives kind of mention or ask they're still working for Fernay, because that's so happens both Fernay and Headmistress Aralda are here in Remir. To which they agree to kind of go and see what the two ravens are working on, and to report back if they need work, see if they can help Fernay and Aralda basically with whatever they're doing. So they do that, and it turns out that Fernay and Aralda are in Remur to attempt kind of manipulating a bit of the magic that Aralda has cast in order to erect kind of the barrier that's keeping the shadowy darkness out. They're trying to see if they can potentially carve a tunnel through it so that they can safely pass and potentially find a way to reach Sinkane's tower. So as Aralda is kind of experimenting with this new magic that Asmodeum kind of helped her to set up, it takes a bit of time, and it's not altogether successful since this is still new to her and it's complicated magic. So she does kind of succeed in beginning to carve a tunnel into this almost plane of shadows and darkness, but something goes wrong and it kind of lashes back out at her, and in that kind of burst of energy, some of the darkness and its creatures seep through to kind of smaller shadows that are just comprised of many limbs that end in claws. These are the slashers that Samari and Fetzer kind of warned them about as one of the nightmare creatures that's roaming around Remir. But then there is one more that is kind of much larger, taller, with long limbs and eyes that seem to kind of swirl in and out of its kind of almost incorporeal body. This one's an amalgam, which is more dangerous and kind of has the capability to kind of link to living minds that it senses nearby, kind of like the Elder Brain. So I'll put the stats for the slashers here. Those, when they hit you, they can give you frenzy points, and when you gain enough frenzy points, it causes you to attack your allies. You gain frenzy points when successfully hitting your allies as a result of getting hit by the slashers, and then the amalgam as well. So I roll initiative, which is a giant initiative because of the enemies, and then I'm also playing Aralda and Fernay. One thing that I found is I don't really like playing an NPC. It's been a difficult thing with my party, where generally in D&D as the DM, you don't want to introduce characters or NPCs that will upstage your party. Slash you want your party to be the hero of the campaign, right? But they also, like, my party like constantly asks for help and for resources and for like allies, so it's like really hard to let them be the center of the party when they're kind of like sabotaging themselves, or like they're trying to bring in other people to like not share the credit but to help them. And in this case, like for Fernay and Arelda, I can't make them like, I can't nerf them or like scale them back because they're supposed to be like very powerful and very capable wizards slash rogues that are in charge of this covenant of spies and assassins. So it's like, how do I like logically give you this aid but also still let them feel like they accomplish this? Because in this fight, like, Arelda and Fernay can pack a punch because they're about level 16 total, whereas my players are level 9. So it gets to the point, it's like, well, why can't they just do this? Or why don't they, who are more powerful than we are, go, you know? But, so yeah, I don't really like playing NPCs, but in this case, I kind of have to. But anyway, so with initiative, it doesn't take too long. The fight, I don't think it gets to dire straits at any point, but the slashers and the amalgam can do quite a bit of damage, and especially if they're attacking each other, they do kind of some extra damage as well. So, but eventually, all three of the nightmare creatures are taken care of. Fernay and Arelda are kind of okay. The party a little bit less so, especially since at the beginning, a few of them got stunned and couldn't save to unstun, which has been kind of a pervading theme, but like, that's what makes these creatures difficult. And you think that if our saving throws aren't high enough, you would try to circumvent that or buff that or do something to, I don't know. Anyways, so after the nightmare creatures are taken care of, they kind of dissolve into the ground and disappear, and Fernay, who has a very high passive perception, is kind of just staring at the wall, at the barrier, at the wall of shadow. And as everyone kind of turns to see what she's looking at, there is a large nightmare creature that's kind of on all fours, kind of with these long kind of limbs, but it has this like extended neck, almost like a serpent, this large head, that is kind of just staring at them, and it speaks to them in a voice that the 5, or I guess the favorable 6 now, recognize as Sinkane's voice. So they don't know if that's him or if he's like projecting himself through this creature, but basically it kind of mocks them a little bit and then invites Fernay to come and talk. The Grim Knives are kind of unsure of what this means, and especially since the party has sort of dictated to them that Sinkane is not a creature to negotiate with, given the goddess he serves. And basically, this tunnel opens up in the nightmare plane, and he says that his invitation will last until the next dawn, and it's up to her if she wants to go and talk to him face to face for negotiations. Who knows? But he also says you can bring some allies if you're scared, you know? And then he kind of steps back and dissolves back into the darkness. So now it's like a big discussion going on about whether or not Fernay should take this, along with Headmistress Arelda, who while Fernay does have a soft spot for the 6, she is still a leader of a covenant, and I'm deciding whether or not they would sacrifice the 6 if asked to, or if like a good enough deal was made. But Sinkane sends a message to Asmodeum asking if he can expedite his return so that they can pick his brain on how best to potentially deal with this. And they kind of start to prepare a little bit. Like a few hours pass. They take a short rest, and eventually Asmodeum does appear. He seems kind of weary, and one of his arms actually is like kind of like blackened and almost withered, and he seems to be kind of like cradling it, like it causes him pain. And he's not really able to speak at first, but eventually like is able to regain control of his voice. But so here I prepped like quite a bit of lore and like story points, but then I'm thinking kind of less relevant to whether or not they should go and fight Sinkane, because honestly I don't really have advice for that. It's like whether they do or they don't, because Asmodeum, he has, well, they don't know, but he has been to the Nightmare Plane to speak with Wistria mostly about Cruella and the orbs, which has been the kind of pressing concern with the party since he left. But he basically brings back the information that Wistria seems confident that she can sway her daughter back to her side if Cruella is freed. And that Cruella, what he knows of Cruella is that she will likely pursue vengeance first. And that if she were to try and strike back against her mother, then maybe she would move on to Yorkaden, which would take some time since Yorkaden is protected in a plane where only his followers can reach. But with the effects of being imprisoned and her kind of being broken, it's hard to predict. He also talks a little bit about the schism, and the schism is how the schism's darkness in an interior is very similar to actually the darkness that has now formed in the southwest portion of the continent. He kind of confirms actually the story that they've heard that the rift was created when Cruella deflected a fatal blow from Wistria to Yorkaden. So because the blade itself was going to kind of take and seal Yorkaden's magic and essence in order to kind of fuse it into the Nightmare Plane so that it would be able to grow and then spread kind of uncontrollably into other planes, kind of like a parasite. But because it didn't kill him, but it still struck him, so she used like the bit of power that she could get from Yorkaden to create a pocket dimension within the Nightmare Plane to imprison Cruella for her transgressions against her mother, for her betrayal. He also thinks that Basil is likely a very like distant descendant of Cruella, and that's why when there was some disturbance with the barrier that separates the rift from the material world, that's why Cruella was able to kind of latch on to his magical energy, and why he's kind of like a College of Whispers bard. He's got some psychic powers of his own. And that backlash of energy also also affected Ivar and the Warforged that they hunted down. So, anyways, with that, so that's Cruella and the orbs, and on the other side of things, with Sinkane, what he was able to learn is that Sinkane has basically, with the completion of the ritual in the tower, he's basically become Wistria's champion, and that the whole tower thing was kind of a trial to deem whether or not he was worthy. Asmodeum is not really aware of what powers or gifts that Sinkane was granted when officially becoming a champion, but He says that Sinkane is kind of well on his way to becoming a living saint. Saints are kind of demigods that are underneath, or lesser gods, I guess, underneath the greater gods like Aremsia and Zenaria and Wistria. And it's probably like a good idea to like cut the head off the snake before it continues to gain power, and to exterminate the pest before the infestation grows. Since with this like shadowy darkness, it seems that Wistria has found a different way to bring her nightmare plane into the material world, and like if it continues to expand, if they're not, Lady Uralda is not going to be able to keep it contained, especially if it decides to go like northward to circumvent the barrier around Pro. So with that, all of that, eventually Uralda and Ferney decide that Ferney is going to go negotiate with Sinkane, at least to see what he has to say. Sinkane did promise not to harm her, for whatever that's worth, but she, like, they're kind of trapped with no real way forward, and she feels like she has to do like something to progress the situation, even if it turns out poorly. Otherwise, they're just gonna be at square one forever while their enemy progresses. The group do agree to come with her, and thus there is a kind of flurry of requests and preparations that they want to make. They want to kind of disguise themselves and keep Sinkane kind of from detecting who they are, so that they can get in and hopefully jump him. So they kind of ask for, well, Asmodeum offers, like amulets against proof of detection or location, which helps hide them from divination magic. Since it seems like Sinkane knows who enters his tower and like how many people there are. They also are going to like disguise themselves, either magically or not, and hopefully that gets them through to the tower. I have some ideas about it, because partly I don't really want this to just be like we go to the boss and kill him, right? I feel like it needs to be a little bit more of a journey than that, especially with given like the first time that they went through this tower. It definitely won't be as long as the last time, but I feel like it's unlikely that they would be able to just waltz in and get the jump on him, especially given his new almost divine, like eldritch kind of powers. But one thing that does happen is Basil will kind of goes off by himself for a bit and beseeches Criella for help. And Criella is very interested about this. She doesn't really know a lot about Sinkane, but Basil kind of fills her in a bit, and she seems a little bit like miffed that he is using this kind of energy of madness to go through with his plans, because that's kind of like her MO. She is able to tell him kind of like ways to stop the darkness from spreading, kind of the ritual like at the source. So she says that they can either like destroy the crystals and like permanently break the minds of everyone who has been trapped in there, or they could try and kind of break Sinkane's hold over it and return the consciousness and sanity of everyone who's been lost so far to this darkness. Basil decides for the latter. So instead of like doing psychic damage on these crystals, the crystal cores that went into the obelisks to start the ritual in the first place, she says that she gifts him like 3 obsidian stakes, kind of these long, just like spikes, and says that once Sinkane is dead, to drive the stakes into his head, into his heart, and into his stomach, and that will kind of break the link that he has to the minds that he's taken, and it will release them and restore them to the rightful owner. There might be some contingencies with this. There might be some ulterior motives, but hey, he doesn't know. She did get him to promise to break another orb, which I think Basil is like pretty reluctant to now, but that is also something Criella has picked up on. So, but he promised to break one for her in return for this, so she agreed. So he now has those 3 snakes with which to help break the ritual and kind of clear this portion of the shadowy darkness. But with that, they're doing some prep and taking a rest before dawn tomorrow so that they can head out fully rested. And that's where we left it. So we've got a bit of a showdown. Return to the tower. Tower part 2, and I'm kind of excited to come up with a bit of a different twist on what they encountered the last time. Because it's not going to be the same. There's no way I would have them just run through the same exact dungeon, but at a higher level. So it'll be interesting to see how they tackle this and what they and how this final showdown with Sinkane is gonna go. But I'm excited. This is gonna be. I loved this tower, and I'm kind of glad to go back. But that is session 60. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for notifications when I put out new videos. I love you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.